A monitoring group says at least a child has been killed following a suspected chemical attack near the Syrian capital. The so-called Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says over a dozen people also suffered breathing difficulties following the attack in eastern Ghouta. The London-based group blames the incident on the Syrian government. Earlier, the Russian Defense Ministry warned that foreign-backed militants in the area were planning to use poisonous agents and put the blame on the government. Well, joining us live now from Perth is Mimi Al-Laham, who is an activist and political commentator. Mimi, thanks for joining us. What do you make of this attack, especially in the wake of the fact that Russia had warned that this would occur?
Well, as usual, these attacks are, the timing of them is very suspicious. This happened right after Russia and Syria agreed to a ceasefire with the militants, which include Al-Qaeda, in Ghouta. And 6 hours later, we have this chemical attack, which was already suspected that the rebels were planning to create such a false flag, which Russian intelligence had exposed and was reported. Also, you should remember that in February, early February, the French president Macron said that France would intervene in Syria if there was a chemical attack that could be proven, and this might have been an invitation for the rebels to create yet another attempt at a chemical attack in order to elicit some kind of intervention from NATO countries and the West. And in this particular case, the fact that it has happened right after the ceasefire has been gone through the United Nations Security Council just sort of shows that they're trying to the rebels are trying to make it like the Syrian government is the one breaking these ceasefire with chemical weapons against civilians. Yes, last time as well, in the Ghouta attack in 2013, they happened on the same day that the OPCW entered into Syria. So all of these attacks that have happened in Syria have had strange timing that would be beneficial to the rebels and not to the Syrian government.
Mimi, I wonder why isn't a proper investigation, a neutral investigation carried out? Because I know in the past Russia has called for that. Even Syria has called for proper neutral investigators to go onto the ground. But obviously there have been security issues with that, considering these attacks take place in militant-held areas a lot of the time. And why isn't, do you think, the topic of the fact that militants do have chemical weapons, as evidenced by both the Syrians and Russians, why isn't that also a topic of discussion?
Well, indeed, people can't go into these areas because these areas are controlled by Al-Qaeda. And of course, that somehow doesn't seem to shed doubt on the claims in the mainstream media, because the US has imperialist goals in Syria, and the rebels, whether they be Al-Qaeda or ISIS or other militants with the exact same philosophies, it doesn't matter to them so long as they can achieve their goals, which is to break Syria up in order to protect Israel and control its oil resources. And Syria did indeed request help and some investigation into the chemical weapons attacks, because the very first chemical weapons attack happened not in Damascus but in Aleppo against Syrian government forces and civilians living under government areas. And the reason the OPCW was in Damascus at the time of the 2013 Ghouta attack was under the request of the Syrian government to investigate another chemical attack. So it just goes to show, this is something that isn't really spoken about very much in the media, because it gets in the way of the agenda of the West. And once again, these militants have demonstrated time and time again that they do possess chemical weapons. Recently, Turkey was accused of using chemical weapons against Kurdish civilians in Afrin, as well as ISIS has been accused of using chemical weapons. The US State Department has officially warned its citizens not to go to Syria because they might be under chemical attacks by rebels, and this was on their website for travel. So it's really out an open secret, but of course we don't really hear about that with the NATO-controlled media because it doesn't fit their regime change agenda.
All right, Mimi, we'll leave there at that, but of course, as always, we appreciate you taking your time out to speak to us here at Press TV.